The reallocation of police funds will hurt the black community.
The reallocation of police funding will help if it goes to the proper programs within the black community.
The American Religious Town Hall is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
I'm James Weingardner, sitting in for Jerry Lutz during another COVID edition of the American Religious Town Hall. During our COVID editions, we have fewer panelists to allow for a little bit more space, but we're glad that you're here because we have another important topic to discuss. And we'll begin now by introducing to you our panelists. Tony?
Hi, I'm Tony Matthews, and I serve as the senior pastor at North Garland Baptist Fellowship in Garland, Texas.
I'm Bishop Michael Olson, and I serve as the Roman Catholic Bishop of the Diocese of Fort Worth, Texas.
My name is Canon John Peterson. I am an Episcopal priest, and I'm canonically resident in the Diocese of Washington, D.C.
I'm Rabbi Dan Levin. I serve as senior rabbi at Temple Beth-El in Boca Raton, Florida.
There's a lot of talk these days about defunding the police and how that would impact various communities. Some groups say that it's not really defunding, and others argue that it really is. But according to the National Police Support Fund, defunding the police means, quote, reallocating or redirecting funding away from the police department to other governmental agencies funded by local municipality, unquote. No matter what word or phrases are used, they point out that it amounts to budget cuts, fewer restrictions, and a less ability to provide meaningful training due to a lack of accessible funds. One very important question to ask is, does the reallocation of redirecting of police funds help or hurt the black community in particular and other communities in general? Tobias Hoonhout is a media reporter for the National Review Online. In an article written by Hoonhout, he cites how the NBA legend Charles Barkley slammed calls to defund the police as a measure that would disproportionately affect communities of color, saying police reform to weed out the bad cops is a better strategy after several cities announced budget cuts to their police departments. Moreover, a Gallup poll surveying more than 36,000 U.S. adults found that 61% of black Americans said they'd like police to spend the same amount of time in their community, while 20% answered they'd like to see more police, totaling 81%. In a nutshell, most blacks do not want the police presence diminished in their communities. In light of these facts, we're asking our panelists to consider the following questions. Number one, regardless of words and phrases used, namely defunding, reallocating, or redirecting funding away from police, will this measure negatively impact black communities? Number two, what strategies or suggestions can the religious community offer to bridge the gap between police officers, black communities, and people in general? And three, does Scripture shed any light on law enforcement and bridging the gap between police and the people? And we begin our discussion with Tony.
Good being here, and I certainly agree that the reallocation of police funds will hurt the black community. I'm pretty firm on that. When I think about this, when I first heard this topic, the discussion, I thought about certain vehicles that have the yellow light that will come on versus the red light. In certain vehicles, the yellow light is like you got to service the engine soon, but it's not, quite urgent. You may have a low tire. Other lights that are red will say you have to check the engine because something severe is going on. When I saw this, I said this is a check engine light. If you're going to defund or reallocate or take funds away from police officers, that will result in fewer police officers in the black community. It's going to just wreak havoc in the black community, in my opinion. In fact, there were articles written about New York City, how they cut the budget for the anti-crime unit, and the crime spiked significantly. When the bad guys know that police officers are fewer in communities, that's an open season to be bad and to do bad things. It's almost a no-brainer to me. And I've spoken with this. This is a topic dear to my heart. Having grown up in the inner city and in a black community, I know that we need policing. Charles Barkley. It shouldn't take Charles Barkley, an NBA, former NBA star, to point this out. But my gosh, he is spot on. I think we need to focus on weeding out the bad cops. You're going to have some bad folks in every organization. You have to just weed them out, and to remove funds from policing is I just think it's not the right thing to do. And according to the surveys that Mr. Moderator, you read, the Gallup poll surveyed more than 36,000 adults, and 61% of Black Americans, 61%. That's a large percentage, say that they would like the police to spend the same amount of time, and then 20% says they would want more policing. So you got an 81%. That's a huge number. You can't overlook that. So although we have some challenges with policing, major challenges, we also know that there are an overwhelming percentage of blacks would like the presence of police, and even more, because we need police officers.
Thank you. Michael?
Oh, I'm really in a lot of agreement with what you said, Tony. Especially, I think we owe justice in obedience to lawful authority, but it's also very important to make sure that authority is indeed lawful. In other words, it requires education and formation and support in the rights for the men and women, white, black, Hispanic, and of other cultures who serve in our police forces. I think sometimes when we direct funds, especially within the police force, we just think, give them more weaponry. And I think police don't want that. And I think there needs to be different priorities. You want to keep the important aspects of law enforcement and the promotion of keeping the peace at the forefront, so that the police have to engage less frequently in the urgent need to put down violent unrest. And so this requires appropriate funding in the right departments within law enforcement in peacekeeping. I think we look at one path that Minneapolis took, for example, which after the catalyst for a lot of violence, the whole George Floyd tragedy, was that there were calls to defund the police. The city council did so, which were followed by massive resignations on the part of the police force, which was then followed by a spike of violent crime, especially within the African American community, which was then followed by a call to hire more police, all the while that the city council had access to their own private security personnel. I don't think that's a path that we would want to take to racial harmony, and there's got to be something broader than just simply funding or defunding the police. There has to be the involvement of every community within the whole community to bring about better understanding.
John?
Yes. I think that the funding of the term defunding the police is really a very unfortunate term. I think it totally misses the issue. In preparation for today's program, someone that I read, and I cannot remember who it was, said instead of defunding the police, why not call it transforming the police system? And that certainly includes both of what those transforming would include exactly the same things that both of you have been saying that is needed. And there's no question about that. But to speak about it from the point of view of defunding, taking away the money, and that's why even in the moderator's statement, there was a whole debate going on in that statement in relationship to, well, what does defunding mean? Cutting out more police, or what exactly does defunding mean? And I think the call to transform or transforming would be far more appropriate. I would like to switch the subject a little here at this point to say that this is not something that is new. This is not a new phenomenon. And in the Gospel of John, in John 18:22, it says, when Jesus had said this, and this is at the site of the crucifixion, one of the police standing nearby struck Jesus in the face, saying, "Is this how you answer the high priest?" Even at that moment in the life of Jesus, Jesus experienced what we would today call police violence. And I think that this is something that is so rooted within our own culture, within our own traditions, that here Jesus gets smacked. And I certainly think that even in the first century, maybe there was a need to transform the police system. The statistics, of course, surrounding this are absolutely staggering. You've already referred to some of it, but police violence is the leading cause of death for young men in the United States. Over the lifetime of one person, every 1 in 1,000 black men can expect to be killed by a police person. Absolutely a staggering statistic. 1 out of 1,000 can be expected to be killed. The risk of being killed by a police person between the ages of 20 and 35 for men and women, and for all racial and ethnic groups, is double that. So what we have here is a real problem in relationship to police violence, and how do we correct that? And instead of defunding, it seems to me transforming is a far more important way of looking at the situation.
Thank you, Dan.
I think just like you, I was horrified by what I saw this last year with the deaths of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. And as you say, that list just goes on and on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing I was horrified by were the people who, in the face of that, were saying defund the police. I found that incomprehensible to me. However, I really think what we need to do is take a look at what we're actually asking of police to be on any given day. And when someone presses 911 and they need police, what are they asking for? There's so many different things. Sometimes they're asking, please come because I got an offender bender. And sometimes they're calling because it's a domestic violence issue, or sometimes because they think there's an intruder, or sometimes because their cat's caught in a tree, right? There's so many different things that we're asking of police to do for which it's impossible to train anybody to be able to do all those things. So what if we could make our 911 system so much more sophisticated so that if someone called and said, my spouse is being violent with me, that the police officer went, but in addition to the police officer, there was someone who was trained in conflict de-escalation and someone who was trained in domestic issues who could de-escalate, who was trained to be able to pull those people apart, not just necessarily with a weapon or with handcuffs, but with words. So that these horrible events that are escalating, because police are trained to serve and protect, and in many ways, police are trained to be warriors. And that's not necessarily the training that's necessarily appropriate to help dealing with a lot of the things that police are being asked to confront. And so I think the other thing that's important for us is to remember that the best knowledge that we have of effective policing is community policing. When the police that are asked to respond in a certain community are people who are known in that community and who know that community. And I think what's really important, as you've said so eloquently today, Tony, we have to listen to the people who live in these communities to say, what do you need and what do you want? Instead of arrogantly assuming that we on the outside of those communities can offer the right prescriptions for what goes on inside those communities.
Yeah. Michael?
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tony. No, you go.
Yeah, I think this is a great topic. The de-escalation piece is so critical. I've always said that I think we need not only police reform or transformation, I think we also should put on the table public reform. And I'm always trying to bring some balance to the situation, because all police officers aren't bad, as we all know. You got some bad ones out there that are intentionally targeting people, but we need police reform and public reform. And what I mean by public reform is we in the black community, we need to carve some time out and talk with our black men, our black sons and our black nephews and our daughters about a proper response to when we're stopped. I tell my son all the time, unfortunately, hey, put your hands on the wheel. Do not disrespect a police officer. Yes, sir. No, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. And so I think we need to spend some time there as well.
I think it's there are a lot of very good things said today. I think one interesting thing, a friend of mine was a police officer, and his father was, and his father maintained, he goes, the worst thing that ever happened is when they took us off of a beat. He said, because then I knew the neighborhood, I knew who belonged, I knew the kids. I wasn't only engaging people when they had problems. He said, now, he said, I get called in on a domestic dispute. I don't know what it's going to be, and I'm in a neighborhood I don't know. Now, without saying, sticking my opinion into criminology or criminal justice or law enforcement, which I'm not saying, and certainly not suggesting that, let's just go back to the good old days, because the good old days weren't that good for so many people, all right? That somehow the involvement of neighborhood, the people who live in the neighborhood, I think the efforts that have been done by leaders in law enforcement have been a good start. I mean, last summer, with all of the terrible violence that was brought about, we also had the examples of so many mayors, so many chiefs of police who were black-faced, all right, who were from the African American community and could speak with a different voice than would have been done in the past. I don't think that needs to be overlooked. I think sometimes we approach the police and it's just sort of like, we want the police, at least the dominant culture does, to make these problems go away or to take them away from my viewpoint. And we'll give you as much money as we need to do to make that happen. And that's a problem, not with policing, but how we form community in our society.
Okay.
I would say that I think what you said really, Tony, was so important about the need for us to respect law enforcement. But law enforcement needs to be respectful, and that respect needs to be earned. And I think that respect needs to be earned not when there's an incident. It needs to be earned months, years before those incidents. And so what you saw in communities where there was already effective partnerships and trust built between law enforcement and those communities is that you didn't see the conflagrations of uprisings that you saw in communities where that work hadn't been done. And I want to promote those kinds of works that I think help lead to strong, healthy communities.
John?
I just want to say just one quick thing. Well, we've certainly concentrated today on the black seen in the United States and police brutality there. We also have to remember that the statistics are not as high, but nearly as high within the American Indian as well as Alaskan communities and Aboriginal people there. And so I think that we have to also be aware that, yes, indeed, we have a huge problem within the black community, but that's not the only community that is facing this. And Latino men, I should also add to that.
Sure. Thank you very much, John. And we've really got the right panel to discuss this today, and we thank you all for being here. Let's go to a break.
If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you and today's closing statements.
Welcome back, and we do invite you to write or to email and let us know what you think about this subject, about this topic, or about topics that you'd like to see future programs on. And we're excited about this subject because it's a subject that's dear to many of us, and we see this in the news every day, and we're going to begin our summations with Tony.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful topic and one that is timely. And I think in terms of strategies, it would be nice if on some of the calls that are mental health related, that we can have a mental health person, an expert, a professional to accompany the police. But of course, you know, that's probably easier said than done. And I also think something we didn't touch on is I think we need to look at, I would hope that it's examined, the police policing the police. I think that is a very important aspect of what's going on. I know there's a case in Buffalo, New York, where a female police officer tried to intervene when she saw some atrocities taking place, and she was terminated. And I think she's been made whole maybe 10, 15, 20 years later. So when the police police the police, I think that's going to help us as well.
John?
The figures and the statistics that we have heard today are staggering. But these figures and statistics make me stop to challenge myself. And I hope that the questions that I am going to present that challenge me also challenge you. How deep is my racism? How deep is my white privilege? Do I just assume this privilege? How willing am I to stand up to our justice system when there is an imbalance in justice, just because of a person's skin color or because of one's economic status? Racism has been described this way. Racism, America's original sin, is political in that it seeks to exclude people from full participation in society based on skin color. It's time to transform.
Dan?
It's hard to follow that. What I would say is that on any given day, we are asking police officers to be guardians, mental health counselors, social workers, conflict resolution experts, public safety officers, and crime fighters. And that's too much. And I think that we need to refund the police by providing specialization so that the right officer, the right professional, assists in the right kind of incident. I also would say that we in the Jewish community, I think, have built blessedly a real trusting partnership with our local police departments to ensure our safety, because certainly we worry about anti-Semitic violence. But I will also say, in the same way, John, that you did, I've never had the conversation with my son or my daughter. I've never had to sit with them and to say, you got to worry about the police. And the reason is because every time they've ever met a police officer, it was on friendly terms. It was the public safety officer at their school, or it was the police officer that hangs out at the synagogue that they see on the high holidays, with whom I've built a partnership and a friendship, and that our community knows and trusts because of the work that we do with the police to help the community in a collaborative fashion. And I think that if we can promote those kinds of reforms within policing and within communities to build those sacred partnerships, then the sense of inhumanity that comes from racism will be hopefully somewhat mitigated when it comes to police behavior.
Michael.
I think police serve within a community, and they're going to take on the characteristics of a community because they're members of a community. Police also serve communities within the community. And so the community has a particular stake in the work of police officers and what they do, as has been stated. Police will have the same challenges that everybody else has with regard to race. However, there will be greater flare-ups there precisely because what is asked to do by the police. I think we have to listen to our police also to see what's not working when this system is broken. What do they see as the problems? Police of every race to contribute to, because the vast majority of police don't want to exacerbate the problems. They're community problems. You know, police are there to serve and to protect. The promotion of peace is very much about service and protection, even when police are asked to respond to violence. Police work is beyond law enforcement and also includes the promotion of peace and the common good within our communities.
Thank you, Michael. Well, really a great and important subject. We're glad to have heard about this. And the Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America, we believe in civil and religious freedom not only in theory, but in reality. Now, friends, until next week at the same time and over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.